We're the All People's Health Collective, where organizers, advocates, and everyday people come together to demand care, housing, and freedom for all. APHC is fighting for care without control, housing without conditions, and dignity for every person.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All People's Health Collective podcast. This is Susan, and I'm joined today with Trinh, Phan. Trinh, it's great to have you on. And just to start us off, can you just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your work and your path into elder justice and advocacy and how you started working with this community?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to be here. My name is Trinh Phan, and I'm the Director of State Income Security at Justice and Aging. Justice and Aging is an organization that works to improve the programs that low-income older adults depend on. I work on the income side of things, focusing on programs like Supplemental Security Income or SSI, which provides critical cash assistance for low-income older adults and individuals with disabilities to pay for housing, food, healthcare, transportation, and other essentials. I do policy advocacy, and I also provide training and technical assistance to legal aid, aging, and disability providers. I used to be a legal aid attorney, helping people who were having problems with a wide range of public benefits, SSI, Social Security, Medicaid, SNAP, which you may know as food stamps. That kind of work gets you into some of the more complicated corners of public benefits, and it pushed me to think deeply about how the programs work, how they help people, and why some of the more confusing or complicated corners of the programs are the way they are. And so in my role now, part of it is helping people to understand this so that we have a base of knowledge that helps us to guide the programs now and into the future and to make them better.
Awesome, thanks, Trinh. And obviously, you have a ton of hands-on experience in the benefits system across policy and the legal side and working with community members. Um, so the system is incredibly complex. I only understand a tiny piece of it. But I know there are a lot of different programs and overlapping benefits. And then there are federal benefits and then state level benefits. Can you just give us an overview kind of the system and then what is something that you wish more people understood?
Yes, I think one thing to recognize is that the system, it's a lot of different programs, and in many ways they're working consciously with each other. They're overlapping with each other, and that's kind of on purpose because they're serving different ends. They have different objectives and goals as the program itself, but they also in certain areas they serve overlapping populations, and when it's functioning in the best way, those overlaps actually work really well to make sure that people who need more help get it, people who need less help get the help they need, people who need more help get more help get the help they need. And so one thing that is really helpful to understand is that sometimes it does get complicated, and that is normal. So even if an idea sounds simple, like universal health care or retirement security, when you go to administer that system, that's always going to bring up complexities because you're dealing with people's lives, and people's lives are different. And how like one person's individual life crosses with a particular program is invariably going to bring up questions that need an answer. What about this situation? What about that situation? After you have 1,000 of these questions, you have a program with a lengthy set of regulations and policies. It is complexity, but it is one that reflects the complexity of real people's lives and what it means to meet the goals of the program while working within the context of real people's lives. And so complexity isn't necessarily bad. A lot of times, complexity is a consequence of doing the job right. That said, the rules aren't always perfect. Part of my work is being someone who will ask the questions. This thing here seems wrong, or like it is a bad idea. Maybe it happened this way originally for this or that reason, but it would really be a good idea if we changed the rule to this other thing instead, for the following 10 reasons. This is just regular process improvement, and you want to be doing this kind of thing all the time. So that's important. It's also important to work with our history and understand our history. We have a better chance of fixing things if we know the history that brought us to today. How did gaps develop in public benefits? Were they always there, or did they develop because we weren't making sure to maintain the programs? This has happened a bit with the SSI program because we have income and resource limits that haven't been updated in decades. You do have to keep up with the times and keep up with rising costs and inflation. Gaps and differences can also exist because different programs have different histories or they have different ends. So one area is you see variation in what programs have resource limits and what those resource limits are. In the SNAP program, for example, there is a specific SNAP policy that allows jurisdictions to streamline eligibility and raise the SNAP asset limit. This is a state decision, and over time, most all of the states have done this to try to increase access to food assistance for their low-income residents. So this is some states responding to the reality of their residents' lives and working to support the residents. And then sometimes these differences exist for other reasons. One thing that comes to mind is what was happening socially and politically in the 1980s and 90s that added a bunch of confusing and bad policies in public benefits that punished very poor people for just existing and living their lives. Those gaps were politically created, and we are still living with a lot of them. We cannot change the past, but we can change the future. And one important question to ask is, how are public benefits becoming better, or how are we making them better? And how can we move forward in that history? So for example, in SSI, we're working to increase the asset limit. There's an obvious history argument because the asset limit was last increased in 1989, and an update is long overdue. And as every year goes by, that gap of what the asset limit was and what it actually represents in real dollars today gets wider and more frustrating. So the asset limit is $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a married couple. If you have more than that asset limit, your SSI payment stops. 2,000 is an exceptionally low asset limit, and it doesn't provide a framework for people to have basic stability. The SSI benefit is already low, and there are plenty of people who aren't going to be able to save even up to the $2,000 asset limit. But when we do program design, our program design should make sure that people who can manage to save are encouraged to save up some money. Because the more people who can save up even a modest amount, the more stability they have, the more choices they have in their life. Their lives are more stable, and that helps make the neighborhoods and communities that we all live in more stable.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. And I especially like that you pointed out the history in the 80s and 90s. Of course, we know that there was a turn towards austerity and a massive defunding of public programs and the safety net. And that was also, really tied up in racist ideas. And so I'm just curious with that kind of approach and some of those ideas, do you see that still shaping how policymakers are approaching the benefit system today, or is there more of a pushback to that, and maybe it varies, at the state level versus the federal level?
I think we always have to be doing the work. Like it's really important to understand history because it keeps repeating. And the way that we get it to stop repeating in really bad ways is understand it, recognize that where the ideas came from so that we can recognize them today and have knowledge and something ready. Like you want to be able to deal with the problem, and that first thing you need to do is actually to recognize what the problem is and be able to identify it when you see it. So I think like the world changes, things change, but people also forget all the time too. And so you think, well, okay, well, we solved that problem back then, right? It just comes back because we're like new people every day. And we have just it's kind of that work is work that you have to do every day, and you have to do it all the time, and that's just part of the work.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about recognizing what the problem is, um, I'm curious if we can kind of shift away from the big picture, or not shift away necessarily, but delve a little more into how these systems affect people. And when you're talking to and working with community members and aging adults, what are some of the stories and challenges that people are sharing with you?
Well, first off, like people want to live their lives. They want to be able to pay their rent, have enough of food, to take care of themselves and the people they love, and take care of their health. People want to live their lives without being scared that something they need is going to fall apart. They want a better and brighter life for themselves, for the people around them, and for the generations coming after them. That's important. In the past year or so, there has been some turmoil in the Social Security Administration, which is the agency that administers SSI and Social Security. And that has caused a lot of distress for seniors and people with disabilities because they worry that basic things like their Social Security check would be disrupted. And that's just really sad to see. Social Security and SSI are huge programs and they touch the lives of so many people. It's not at all abstract when you talk to people. This is how people pay their rent, and being responsible with these programs is so important. Something else that's been coming up recently is ABLE accounts, which are a way to save money even if you are receiving SSI. So ABLE is an acronym. It stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, and it allows people whose disability began before age 46 to open one of these ABLE accounts and save up to $100,000 in them without affecting eligibility for SSI, and then also without affecting eligibility for most other federal public benefits as well. So ABLE's been coming up recently because there was an increase to the eligibility age. It used to be your disability had to have begun before age 26, and now, as of January of this year, it is age 46. You can open an ABLE account at any age. You can be 70 years old now. And so long as your disability began before age 46, you can go ahead and open an account now. And so a lot of people can now open these accounts and in doing so, protect themselves from the harshness of that $2,000 SSI asset limit. That's great news, right? And as the public education and outreach work for this is happening, it is interesting to see how some of the reflexive fear from the SSI asset limit is making this outreach and education work harder. Because people hear about this and it sounds a little suspicious to them. It feels unreal that they can just put money into this new special account and it magically doesn't count for SSI. It sounds like there must be some kind of a catch, or maybe this is some kind of new investment scam. It isn't, but you can see where people are coming from in the context of their lives and experiences. They're worried, and that worry makes sense. And so you want to be conscious of what policy decisions are actually doing to people's lives and their ability to make choices for themselves. Ideally, we want people to learn how to make good choices, including making good financial choices. But if people are not given any choices to make, or they're just given terrible choices, and they have no space in which to learn how to make good choices, like how can we expect them to learn to make good choices?
And you mentioned asset limits already. I'm curious how many people um, have been able to use the able accounts. Is that what they're called? I'm sorry
Yes.
if yes, able accounts.
Yeah.
Or if there are still a lot of folks out there who either don't qualify or are skeptical, as you pointed out, or aren't aware of how to set up these accounts, and so are still being subject to these asset limits and sort of trapped in this system where they have to choose between, having their benefits or just building like even a very modest.
Yeah. Yeah. So from what I hear from the able experts, able accounts are actually really underutilized now. So there's a lot more people who qualify to open one than there are open able accounts. So there's a lot of outreach and education work still to happen. And then with SSI specifically, I think there's some additional work too, because you have to overcome like the framework of the SSI asset limit, which has given people a mental picture that is actually really accurate. So it's very rigid. You have to be really careful. And it can be very harsh if you go over the asset limit. So that's very accurate to how the SSI asset limit works. And so when people have reflexive fear about that, that's just accurate. And so able accounts actually provide it's very much like a checking account. So it isn't like you have to pay a whole bunch of money to somebody to set up this special account and it's really hard to administer. It's really like setting up another bank account. So it's very simple in that way. It works, but you have to get people to understand that. And you have to recognize where people are coming from like it's just basic education work and also basic overcoming their experience with the SSI program and the asset limit so far. So that's some special work as well. And then there's still some gap here, even if we get to better outreach, because not everyone in the SSI universe, it's not the entire universe who can open an account. You have to have a disability that began before age 46. So if you're an older adult now and you have SSI based on age, you don't have a disability, you don't qualify to open this account. Or if you have a disability, but it began like after age 46, you also can't open an account. So it's not quite everyone. So I think there's some like careful outreach to make sure we're giving people accurate information that yes, there's a whole bunch of more people who can qualify for this and it actually is helpful, while also like making sure we're accurate. Like it's not everyone, but it's a lot of people. So it's communicating that out is important because there's been so few ways to kind of do the things you want people to do, like save a little money, have an emergency account, like make some plans that for what they want to do and actually have financial plans and have the wherewithal to kind of move forward with them. But that's been really hard in that society world.
Yeah, well, it sounds like this is a really, promising um, measure and at least one step towards filling some of the gaps in the system. And I'm wondering, in the places where people still aren't getting the assistance they need, what are the other gaps or biggest gaps that you're seeing, and what other solutions are out there to try to meet people where they are?
Yeah, so I think that one is just getting that general asset limit increase because it doesn't make any sense. Like the way that works right now, like if you get a small inheritance, and like you're forced to spend it down like the same months you get it. Otherwise, you risk getting your SSI benefit cut off. If you're trying to save up for um, like your property tax, you're a homeowner and you're trying to save up for property taxes. It's really hard to do that when you can't go over $2,000 and people have to end up taking out loans from somebody and then paying them back. It's just this complicated ordeal because you can't do something basic like save for expenses you need to pay. So there's just it makes sense to no one. We can raise that. That's just part of our um, maintenance of the program. And then there's other maintenance of the program too, like just raising some of the income eligibility standards because wages have gone up and there's some things that sort of are meant to help people who receive SSI and work, but um, the income disregard you can take for that is really low. So just updating those numbers as well, increasing the benefit level. So so that everyone who receives SSI can be at the poverty level. So I think some of this is really also thinking about what the program looks like, because we have the world we have today, and we have it sitting here for a lot of different reasons that we can actually understand and explain. And one way to move toward the future is to think about, well, okay, what are we trying to do with the program? There's some things that have been outdated. If we update all these things, we do all of that, what does the program look like? Does it do what we're trying to get it to do in the context of the broader system? Because a lot of programs, like, you're really trying to get them to do something fairly specific, and you're trying to get them to do that fairly specific thing as well and completely as possible. And so with SSI, there's a couple of bills in Congress to make those updates. So there's one that's just on the asset limit, the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. Pretty sure that's what it's called. So that's just raising the asset limit. There's a more general one called the SSI Restoration Act, and that has a lot more widespread changes, and it's a lot more of that, well, let's imagine what the program looks like if we actually just made these basic changes that pretty much everyone agrees on, and then also these other changes that maybe there's like some more debate on those. But if we really actually update the program and get it to like the best place we can get it to, I think the world looks different, and the program looks better. It is doing more of what we want it to do to support seniors and people with disabilities, and I think that's something we should should be doing for like the system as a whole and for the benefits as a whole. Because sometimes people get discouraged because of how well, this one's so unfair, like, why is this? And I think one answer to that is, well, you need to actually fight for it. Like, you like, it'd be nice if we didn't have to fight for it, but we do. So just basic updates, things that need to happen, we do need to fight for it.
Yeah, and I can also like as you're speaking, I can feel kind of the some disconnect between what I imagine or perceive to be a lack of um urgency or just a lack of, if you're not receiving benefits, you're not depending on these programs. It's just a totally different world from if you're someone who does need benefits in order to like to survive and have a decent life. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of reground us in the like experience itself, for people who are caught in what in APHC we would call these poverty traps, or maybe the benefits cliff is another term I've heard, going back to kind of those really difficult choices that people have to make. Yeah, what are the things that people are sort of sharing about their experiences?
Yeah, I think the best thing we can do is actually to hear from actual people. So I feel like the people who can do that are the people who are experiencing it. But I'll share some from my experience, which is sort of like secondhand, because it's important. It's important to start from somewhere. And so, like, I was legally an attorney, and a lot. I like the SSI Restoration Act because I think a lot of the problems that I saw as a legal aid attorney wouldn't have existed. Like, that client would have come to me because it would have been fine. Like, there's so many problems where the program not being where like, where it was, where we like fully intended to be, has made people's lives just so much more difficult. And it doesn't need to be that way. And so, like, for just in relation to the asset limit, I can give a couple examples from there. So someone's parent had passed away and had left them a small inheritance. It wasn't a lot, If it was a big inheritance, then you can maybe set up a special needs trust that protects the asset for SSI purposes, but something like that costs money to set up. And if you have something small, like $5,000 or $10,000, that's not going to make any sense. And so the person was left with the need to spend down this inheritance very urgently. And the urgency is because of how the SSI asset limit works. If you receive something today, it counts as income for this month. So it's income for this month. If there's anything left of it on the first day of next month, it counts toward the asset limit. And if in that counting, you're at $2,000 or more, your SSI payment stops. So that's the urgency. And so like people in this situation, a lot of times their natural response is, well, can I just like have some time to spend it? I just got it. It's kind of a rush. I'd like to have some time to spend it down, and you can't because of that rule. And so in these situations, like people are frantic, and sometimes they just give the money away to someone else thinking, well, I just need this money to go away for me, or they spend the money rashly. And when you're thinking about this in the abstract outside of real life, it can be astonishing. Why would someone just give money away? But if you understand how the SSI asset limit works, it makes so much sense why people respond this way. They are stressed out, and the only thing they have is terrible choices. So they just do, like, they need to protect the benefit that lets them pay rent every month. Like they can't, and oftentimes it's attached to your Medicaid as well. So that's a huge and terrible choice to present to people. And so they just give the money away, like anything to kind of make this problem go away. This money is just causing me a whole bunch of problems. And that is just, it's wrong. Like if people have a little bit of financial security, let them keep it. It's just let them keep it. Just allow them some freedom, allow them the choice, allow them to have something. For the people who even can have something, like let that be. And so like the situation, it was a mess, and it was just really frustrating to see someone have to go through that, and see just how unfair that was. And then another situation was where like someone had bought a life insurance policy like many years ago, and they didn't realize that it had a cash surrender value. And what that means is that you can cash out the policy at any time and receive some money in advance, not the full value of the policy, but just some money. And so over the years, that cash surrender value crept up until it crossed over the $2,000 mark. And so their SSI payment stopped. They ended up having to liquidate that just very small life insurance policy and spend it down just so they could restart their SSI. And that meant also giving up that bit of financial security that the policy represented for them. And that again is just, you don't need to take this away from people. It's just weird, and it's really unnecessary. It's just like you want people to have some basic stability, and what you're doing and what happens in these situations is you're stripping them of a very small asset that could be there to help stabilize them. Like it's just, yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing those stories. I feel like they just draw out a sort of ordinary bureaucratic cruelty that people experience in these systems that, it might be hard to understand because of how complex they are, unless you're actually living them or working directly or talking to people who are impacted by all these caveats and gaps and limitations that you're pointing out. It also strikes me that this is a system of punishment, and there are a lot of other systems of punishment. As we know, there's the carceral system, there's the immigration system. I am hoping that you can talk a little bit about how those other systems overlap with the work that you do and the kind of gaps that you see that are maybe specific to, for example, older adults who are transitioning from incarceration back to their communities. What are some of those experiences and challenges that people are facing there?
Yeah, so it's been really, I've started doing a little bit of work around reentry, just coming very specifically from where I have expertise, which is around SSI policy. And so that's been really interesting to think about, well, how can what can I do to help? And in what way can it help and contribute to the work that other people are doing as well? And it also like led me to make sure I knew something about what was happening too, so I can understand the context of the work that I am doing, and do my best to make sure that it's being done in a way that makes sense. And so one of the things, kind of in thinking through how that system works for older adults, is that um, there's challenges in reentry that exist for everyone, and then for older adults, as with any specific population, there are challenges that are specific to older adults. So one is that like the big public benefits are really important, like Social Security or SSI, and being able to like services for seniors like Meals on Wheels, other supports that we have for older adults, because that's how they're going to pay rent, how they're going to buy food, how they're going to get medical care for themselves. An older adult, and this is true for all older adults, is if you have a medical condition or a disability, they may also need to figure out the logistics for their medical care, make sure that they have the medications they need in that transition period, and connect to any medical providers or any in-home care they need. It's really like any other older adult, except it's more stressful because you have to set this entire set of resources and support that another older adult may have spent months or years building, and you have to do it all at once. So that's much more challenging. And so the work that I've been doing on the SSI policy end is actually trying to highlight one of the policies that makes that moment of transition harder, which is around the application process. So like, how do you, like on day one, how do you make sure people have the things that they qualify for? Like, how do you make sure that they actually have them so that they can have a place to live and have food to eat? And like having a place to live when you back to kind of move back from that, in a lot of ways it means having some kind of income that will allow you to pay the rent, because your landlord expects you to pay the rent, and you need some income to do that. And so making sure that if someone qualifies for SSI based on disability or age, that they actually have that benefit in hand on day one. And this one is really challenging for people returning home to the community because of it's a really specific SSI rule. So with the disability benefits, you can have disability benefits based through the Social Security program. So it's Social Security Disability or SSDI. You could also have disability benefits through the SSI program if you don't have enough work quarters to qualify for the SSDI program. And so those are two different disability benefits. And the way they work at reentry is different because the Social Security rule and SSI rule are different. The Social Security rule, and this applies to people who have SSDI. So if you were receiving SSDI before you were incarcerated, then you were incarcerated, and then you come back to the community. When you come back to the community, you can just go to Social Security and say, can I restart my SSDI benefit? And they will restart it. So that gets you like back into the program when you come back into the community. With SSDI, they have they have a specific suspension rule. So they say, okay, lost SSI for some reason, like you're incarcerated and so you can't receive SSI while you're incarcerated. So you lost it because you're incarcerated or because you went over the asset limit and you don't qualify for the payment anymore. They'll put you into a suspense status. So you're in suspense status where you don't get payment, but your case is still active. So your case is still like technically live in their system. And within that 12-month suspension period, if you come back to them and say, oh, now I'm back in the community, or oh, now I spent down that money, then they will restart your benefit. But it's just that 12-month period. Once you cross the 12-month period, they won't restart it. They'll make you reapply for SSI and go through the application process again. And so this is a problem on the disability end because no one wants to go through a Social Security disability application a second time. It's complicated, it's hard, and it can take months or years for someone who qualifies to actually be approved. And so if you cross over that, if you're incarcerated, you cross over that 12-month line and you're still incarcerated, you come back out into the community, you can't restart your SSI benefit. They're going to make you go through the whole application process again, and it's a real ordeal. And so I've been trying to highlight that and to kind of advocate for aligning the SSI rule in this case with SSDI, so that if you're incarcerated, you come back out into the community and you can just restart your SSI disability benefit as well, because it makes sense. And the way it works now, you have people who are in a really similar situation having different outcomes. You have this disability, you're incarcerated, you return to the community, one person has their benefit restarted, the other person goes through the whole terrible disability determination process all over again. And that's like, for the people who do that work, it just seems really unfair. When you see the person, it makes no sense. And then from from what we understand of disability, it also makes no sense, because it's not like, well, you were incarcerated for 13 months, like that doesn't, or however many years, like being incarcerated for more than more than a year doesn't make your disability better. If anything, it probably made your disability worse. So there's no logic to saying to an outcome that makes someone go through that disability determination process again. So I've been in the last couple of years just trying to highlight that. So because part of the work is helping people to understand what the problem is and contributing to that knowledge base, so we all understand what the problem is. And then the next part is actually doing something, but you need to also have that base of knowledge to start. Like, that's really important for good policy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you pointed out, I think it's just important to highlight that incarceration itself, as you mentioned, is disabling or exacerbates existing disabilities in a lot of cases. And I wasn't aware of the SSDI limitation or suspension policy for formerly incarcerated people, and it just seems particularly cruel given what we know about aging in prison and the lack of care, the conditions, and the toll of being locked up and separated from family and community. I think I remember reading somewhere that 1 year in prison is like aging 2 or 3 years on the outside. So yeah, it's really interesting to get more into the weeds on these policies and how people are being, it's not that people are falling through the cracks, but how the policy is like designed to keep certain people out at the moment. Um, and just as we're wrapping up, thank you so much for this interview, Trin. Is there anything that you want to make sure listeners walk away with, or anything that you just want people to know and to think about as we're wrapping up here?
Yeah, I think one thing to always remember, I think, is that we all have a role to play in this. And I think a lot of times it's just thinking about what your role is in the work that you do and the work that other people do, and how you support their work. But we all have a role to play. We all probably have a whole bunch of roles to play. And it's good for each of us to really think about that. And like, what are our roles? What can we do in different things? Whether we're supporting, cheering somebody on, doing something actively. But the change happens when the change happens for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons it happens is because we make it happen.
A great note to end on. Thank you so much again. This has been a really thoughtful and yeah, interesting interview. And just really appreciate you coming on the podcast and talking to us about SSI and benefits and these systems and kind of helping decode a very convoluted and complex world out there.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for having me. It's like, I love talking about this stuff, and it's really helpful when someone actually wants to hear it. So I hope it was helpful for you and for other people. It's a really important part of our lives.